The name Tiberius evokes images of a stern, perhaps even austere Roman emperor, a figure often overshadowed by the larger-than-life personalities of Augustus before him and Caligula after. Yet, beneath the stoic facade and the historical narratives that paint him as a reluctant ruler, lies a labyrinth of ambition, paranoia, and deeply unsettling personal accusations that few modern accounts truly dare to explore. We tend to remember the military successes, the consolidation of the empire, and perhaps his eventual withdrawal to Capri. But the true depths of his reign and the shadows that clung to his name often remain unspoken, veiled by centuries of carefully curated history and the inherent biases of ancient chroniclers. Tiberius Claudius Nero was born in 42 BC, a scion of one of Rome's most ancient and distinguished patrician families, the Claudii. His early life was shaped by the tumultuous civil wars that followed Julius Caesar's assassination. His mother, Livia Drusilla, was a woman of immense intelligence and ambition who, in 38 BC, divorced Tiberius's father to marry Octavian, the man who would become Augustus, Rome's first emperor. This union thrust young Tiberius into the very heart of Rome's burgeoning imperial family, but also into a world of complex dynastic politics, where he was, initially, an outsider, a stepson in a household determined to secure a Julian bloodline for the succession. Despite these challenging beginnings, Tiberius quickly established himself as a man of formidable capability, especially in military matters. His early commands saw him leading legions with distinction. At just 22, he achieved significant acclaim by recovering the Roman standards lost in Parthia decades earlier, a feat of diplomacy and military pressure that restored immense national pride. He then embarked on campaigns in Pannonia and Germania, effectively expanding and securing Rome's northern frontiers. These were not minor skirmishes. His efforts in these regions were critical to solidifying the empire's borders, earning him a reputation as a skilled strategist and a disciplined leader who shared the hardships of his men. He earned multiple triumphs and ovations, demonstrating his undeniable competence and solidifying his standing as one of Rome's most effective generals. This period of his life was marked by undeniable success, a stark contrast to the troubled years that would follow. However, Tiberius's personal life was fraught with tragedy and manipulation. He was happily married to Vipsania Agrippina, the daughter of Augustus's close friend and general Marcus Agrippa, and they had a son, Drusus Julius Caesar. But this contented domesticity was shattered when Augustus, after the death of Agrippa, compelled Tiberius to divorce Vipsania and marry his own daughter, Julia the Elder, who was Tiberius's stepsister and the widow of Agrippa. This was a devastating blow for Tiberius, as he genuinely loved Vipsania. His marriage to Julia, a woman known for her independent and somewhat scandalous lifestyle, was deeply unhappy and produced no children. This forced marital union, driven purely by dynastic considerations to intertwine the Claudian and Julian lines, arguably planted seeds of bitterness and resentment in Tiberius, fostering a profound sense of personal disillusionment. Augustus, obsessed with establishing a stable succession, continually sought to secure a Julian heir. With the untimely deaths of his grandsons, Gaius and Lucius Caesar, Tiberius, though not Augustus's first choice, became the only viable successor. In 4 AD, Augustus formally adopted Tiberius, making him his son and heir, but also compelling him to adopt Germanicus, his popular nephew, as his own heir, even though Tiberius had his own son, Drusus. This arrangement, designed to ensure a smooth transition and maintain the Julian bloodline through Germanicus's children with Agrippina, Augustus's granddaughter, made it clear to Tiberius that he was, to some extent, a placeholder, a caretaker emperor. When Augustus died in 14 AD, Tiberius, now 55, ascended to the principate. His accession was marked by a peculiar display of reluctance, with Tiberius engaging in protracted debates with the Senate, seemingly hesitant to accept the immense power of the emperorship. While some historians interpret this as genuine humility or a desire to uphold republican traditions, others view it as a calculated performance, a characteristic blend of his reserved nature and political maneuvering. When Augustus died in 14 AD, Tiberius, now 55, ascended to the principate. His accession was marked by a peculiar display of reluctance, with Tiberius engaging in protracted debates with the Senate, seemingly hesitant to accept the immense power of the emperorship. While some historians interpret this as genuine humility or a desire to uphold republican traditions, others view it as a calculated performance, a characteristic blend of his reserved nature and political maneuvering. He was an emperor who preferred the certainties of military life to the intricate, often hypocritical, world of senatorial government. The early years of his reign saw a generally pragmatic and efficient administration. Tiberius was fiscally responsible, avoided lavish public spending, and focused on maintaining the empire's borders rather than costly expansion. However, a darker undercurrent soon began to manifest, fueled by his inherent suspicion and the growing influence of certain key figures. The most significant of these was Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the prefect of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus, an equestrian by birth, rose to unprecedented power, transforming the Praetorian Guard from a scattered bodyguard unit into a centralized, potent military force stationed within Rome itself. He became Tiberius's trusted advisor, an indispensable partner in governance, particularly as the emperor grew increasingly detached from the day-to-day affairs of Rome. Tiberius himself referred to Sejanus as his socius laborum, or partner in my toils. This immense trust, however, proved to be a catastrophic error. Sejanus, driven by boundless ambition, began to systematically eliminate potential rivals to his influence and, ultimately, to the succession itself. He strategically placed allies in crucial government positions and ruthlessly removed adversaries, often through accusations of treason. Perhaps his most infamous alleged plot involved the death of Tiberius's own son, Drusus Julius Caesar, in 23 AD. Ancient sources suggest Sejanus seduced Drusus's wife, Livilla, and convinced her to assist in poisoning her husband, thus removing a direct heir to the throne and a personal rival. With Drusus out of the picture, Sejanus positioned himself ever closer to imperial power, even seeking to marry Livilla. The atmosphere in Rome became increasingly poisoned by fear, largely due to the widespread use of maiestas, treason trials. Originally intended to protect the Roman people's majesty, these laws were broadened under Tiberius to include insults against the emperor and his family. Professional informers, known as delatores, were incentivized by rewards, often a quarter of the accused confiscated property, to bring charges. This created a climate of suspicion where senators and prominent citizens lived in constant dread, fearing false accusations and swift, brutal condemnations. Even seemingly trivial remarks could lead to capital punishment, with no opportunity for exile and their property seized. Tiberius, though initially reluctant to encourage such charges, eventually allowed them to proliferate, further cementing his image as a tyrannical figure in the eyes of many. In 26 AD, Tiberius made the fateful decision to withdraw from Rome entirely, relocating to the island of Capri, where he would spend the remaining 11 years of his reign. The reasons for this self-imposed exile are debated, but several factors likely contributed. His growing disillusionment with Roman politics, the stifling influence of his aging mother Livia, who continued to wield considerable unofficial power until her death in 29 AD, and perhaps an innate desire for privacy and solitude all played a part. Some accounts suggest he sought to escape political pressures and his own mounting paranoia. Yet his departure left Sejanus in effective control of the imperial administration in Rome, allowing the prefect's power to expand unchecked. It is during these Capri years that the most disturbing accusations against Tiberius emerge, secrets no one talks about due to their graphic and morally repugnant nature. Ancient historians, particularly Suetonius and Tacitus, paint a picture of an emperor who, freed from public scrutiny and surrounded by a compliant court, indulged in extreme forms of private behavior. The accounts describe lavish and morally questionable entertainments at his secluded Villa Jovis, perched atop the cliffs of Capri. These sources speak of a life consumed by hedonism and acts that were considered deeply depraved even by Roman standards. Specifically, the most disturbing accusations involved the exploitation of the young, with claims of perverse activities and the censored gratification derived from vulnerable individuals. Suetonius, in particular, details bizarre and censored scenarios involving children, which are frankly too explicit to describe directly, but strongly imply severe forms of sexual abuse and manipulation. He suggests that Tiberius trained young boys for particular acts and even used infants in disturbing ways. Furthermore, there were accusations of forcing individuals into inappropriate acts as entertainment. These ancient claims, while sensationalized and possibly exaggerated by hostile sources who sought to demonize a disliked emperor, paint a stark picture of a ruler whose isolation seemingly unleashed a darker side of his personality. Tacitus echoes this sentiment, suggesting that Tiberius, no longer restrained by shame or fear, succumbed entirely to his own inclinations in his final years. The island of Capri became, in popular imagination, a den of vice, a place where the old goat, as he was sometimes derisively called, indulged in every conceivable perversion. While on Capri, Tiberius remained politically active, albeit remotely, communicating his decisions through a network of loyal agents. However, his isolation also heightened his paranoia. He became convinced that Sejanus, the man he had trusted implicitly, was conspiring against him, aiming to usurp the throne. The precise details of Sejanus's downfall are dramatic. Antonia the Younger, Tiberius's sister-in-law, reportedly sent a letter to Capri alerting the emperor to Sejanus's growing threat. In 31 AD, Tiberius orchestrated Sejanus's swift and brutal execution from afar with the help of Naevius Sutorius Macro, who replaced Sejanus as praetorian prefect. Sejanus was denounced in the Senate, arrested and strangled, his body thrown down the Gemonian stairs, a fate he had inflicted on many others. A ruthless purge followed, with Sejanus's family and many of his associates also put to death. The story of his daughter's execution, reportedly raped before being strangled to circumvent a law protecting virgins from capital punishment, highlights the horrific cruelty that characterized this period. After Sejanus's fall, Tiberius's paranoia intensified, and the reign of terror continued. He became even more reclusive, rarely leaving his villa, and the number of treason trials escalated further. He spent significant time brooding over the death of his son and seemed to act without compunction in condemning those suspected of disloyalty. This final phase of his reign, marked by an ever-present atmosphere of fear and widespread executions, permanently stained his legacy. Tiberius died in 37 AD at the age of 77, likely of natural causes, though some ancient accounts suggest his death may have been hastened by Macro or Caligula. The news of his death was met with widespread public rejoicing in Rome, a testament to the popular hatred he had engendered in his later years. He left no clear direct heir, having designated both his probable natural grandson, Tiberius Gemellus, and his adopted grandson, Germanicus's son Caligula, as joint heirs, though he seemed to favor Caligula. It was Caligula who ultimately succeeded him, ushered in by the hope that his reign would be a stark contrast to Tiberius's perceived tyranny. The historical assessment of Tiberius remains complex and debated. While ancient sources, particularly Tacitus and Suetonius, are overwhelmingly negative, portraying him as a gloomy, cruel, and depraved tyrant, modern historians often attempt a more nuanced view. They acknowledge his military genius and his fiscal prudence, recognizing that he maintained the stability of the empire during a critical transitional period. Some argue that the sensational accusations of depravity from his time on Capri were exaggerated propaganda, fueled by political animosity and the desire to compare him unfavorably to Augustus. The isolated and cryptic nature of his rule, combined with his stern personality and a clear disdain for public popularity, made him an easy target for hostile narratives. However, even with these reassessments, the shadow of his later years, marked by intense paranoia, the pervasive treason trials, and the deeply disturbing allegations of personal excess on Capri, cannot be entirely dismissed. Tiberius remains a figure of contradictions, a brilliant general and an astute administrator who also became a reclusive, suspicious ruler accused of shocking moral failings. His story exposes the often unseen struggles of power, the corrupting influence of unchecked authority, and the enduring difficulty of separating fact from the politically charged narratives of history. The deep secrets of Tiberius offer a chilling glimpse into the darker corners of Roman imperial power, reminding us that even the most seemingly stoic figures can harbor profound complexities and engage in acts that defy conventional understanding.